Hello, friends. Welcome to our Southern Community, your public affairs program exploring the people and the issues of the environment, energy, and economics across the region. Today's program will touch onto all three subjects. It is a delight to have our guest here today, Brotherhug Barlow, a communitarian. Brotherhug, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ned. It's good to be here.
It should be a very interesting conversation, folks. I have known Brotherhug casually and by reputation for many years now. Some people say we even look alike, which I take as a compliment. I'm not sure how you feel about it, Brotherhug.
Oh, I'll agree with that. I often have people come up to me and start conversations that I have no idea what they're talking about and say, "You're talking to Ned, aren't you?" And they look at me like I'm crazy and they figure it out.
You can see Brotherhug in your left speaker, and I'm in your right speaker if you want to take a look. Well, let us get to the conversation a bit. I am really excited about our discussion here today because it is about community, and you have, in many ways, if I can say it, dedicated yourself to community building with some very notable success. How about defining a communitarian for us?
Well, I call myself a communitarian because to me, building community around where I live is one of the most important things I've found that I can do to create a better space to live in myself. If I have a neighborhood and a community that I really want to be in, I'm happier living there, plain and simple. In Atlanta, we worked in Little Five Points for many years. We lived in an old house that needed a lot of work, but we put more energy into building the community around our house than putting effort into our house per se. Did gardening in the front yard, which created other neighbors beginning to do that, and we built this whole community around the gardens, and we started a land trust, and we did a forest restoration, and everything involved people coming together and building community together, which made a much better place to live. It translated eventually into property values, which was not my intent, but our property values exploded because everybody wanted to come live in this amazing community we were building.
And this experience in Atlanta, which I think is worth covering a little bit more here, is in some ways really what got you on the path to being a communitarian in an active sense?
Very much so. We lived in Little Five Points in Atlanta for 29 years. Little Five Points is a community that kind of was left over after the big hippie influx of 1968 when there were about 250,000 hippies moved into Atlanta. Most of them at the end of the summer left, but a lot of people stayed and started buying up houses. You could buy a house in Little Five Points back then for $3,000 if you had the cash. But the neighborhood was redlined. You couldn't get a mortgage, you couldn't get a home improvement loan, you couldn't get insurance on that house.
Redlined by the banks.
By the banks and the insurance companies. It means the banks and insurance companies would not do any business in that area. As a result, the neighbors formed a credit union to do home improvement loans. Neighbors formed a co-op, natural foods co-op, 700 that's still there. Bond Community Credit Union still there. These are all over 40 years old now. But this whole community evolved in this one rundown area, and it was basically a bohemian ghetto, but it's now very gentrified, and yet still there's all this old energy that's still there. The experience in Little Five Points was really a training ground for me because there were so many activists and so many conscious people in that community that the response was, if not now, when? If not you, who? We need to deal with this. And we worked as community.
It seems that there is a resurgence of paying attention to community. We see projects such as the Patchwork Urban Farms, what you're doing with the Greenways, and we're going to talk more about that. There's some hope on the horizon here.
I think there's hope. One thing that's given me hope is seeing the young permaculturists out there, the next generation. I see these young people embracing permaculture with a passion. People like Zev Friedman, who I know has been on your show.
Yes, wonderful fellow.
I listen to Zev, and I'm with him, and I feel there's hope. We live in a 1927 house, which has a nice front porch on it, and there's 4 of them on this street. All 4 of the houses, I'll see people sitting out front even though they're not as much probably as commonly as we are, but all four of them use the porch. When people have porches, they still use them. But we've built the infrastructure as such, they aren't there anymore. You don't have it, you can't use it. You might have a back deck. Sit out and watch the...
So you hide in the backyard.
In the backyard. We've got a back deck too, but we sit on the front porch more than we do the deck, just because that's an interaction in the community. There's so many ways that just small interactions that build community. In Atlanta, one neighbor coined the term co-housing without walls. We had a co-housing community of 12 households in our neighborhood. And we decided to do this kind of community of a co-housing without walls. Basically, we do the potlucks, we do the sharing, we did a lot of the stuff of having that interaction. Several of my neighbors there had keys. If they needed something for dinner, they'd come dig through my pantry if I wasn't there. We did potlucks together. We did these things to build community. I mentioned earlier, I think about gardening. We started front yard gardening there because the front yard garden, people that were walking by, it gave them a chance to stop and talk. Say, oh, your garden's so beautiful, and we get talking. Where do you live? We get to be friends.
That experience and your time in Atlanta laid the groundwork for the work you've done coming up here in Western North Carolina and Asheville. In Atlanta, one of the projects you got involved with, I don't know if you actually led it, how about explaining for us, but developing a land trust to protect the property in that community.
About 28 years ago, one of our neighbors came up with this concept of buying some property that was discarded by MARTA, the rapid rail system in Atlanta. They moved the sewer line when they had to move the sewer to dig an underpass under the rail. This was a little 1.5-acre tract that was covered with kudzu. It was all red clay and kudzu. There were a couple beautiful trees on it, but that was it. Some neighbors got together, raised the money, were able to buy the land from MARTA, and we, as a group, began developing it. I was not real active in early days just because I was very involved with my printing business at that point, but I was part of it and then later became a trustee. First thing we built was a little pagoda for potlucks, so we could have neighborhood potlucks. On the 13th of every month, we'd have a neighborhood potluck.
Lucky 13.
Lucky 13. And then we built a sweat lodge. It was a nice wooden structure with a wooden stove inside. It burned down one night when somebody left a fire going in there. But it's been rebuilt since. Then later we built a stage and started where we could do concerts and have festivals. So it's become this huge gathering spot for
a community center.
It's very much a community center. It's privately held and run by a board of directors. Formerly was run by a group of trustees, but we've changed structure a little bit on that. But it is a community focus. People come down and walk their dogs. Wonderful rope swing in this old pecan tree. Kids have a little playground. It's just an amazing space, public space right there in Atlanta. One about the highlights for me and for many is that twice a month we did drum circles there. We had a huge bonfire, amphitheater setup we built and kind of dug into the ground, big sand around the fire pit so it stays safe. Twice a month on Saturday night we would gather and drummers would come and dancers would come, and it got up to about 400 people at one point. We had to trim it down because it's too big.
That's a big crowd.
It was big.
Yeah, for an acre or two, that's packing them in.
We would pack them in, but we were right there in the city. MARTA trains would go by while we're up there drumming.
Watching the bonfire and all those wild dancers reveling to the beat.
Bunch of crazy hippies out there drumming and having a good time.
They weren't necessarily that crazy, I'll say that for them.
No, we weren't that crazy. Well, when we moved here in 2006, I had that experience in Atlanta. We'd been 20 years developing that land trust there. First week we were here, I was out exploring, walked across the road, found this little dirt road right across the road from me, Sand Hill Road. Was curious what it was, walked down, found Omni Creek, this big wide creek, and I thought, boy, this is beautiful. Came back and Janet looked up on GIS who owned the property and what it was. We found out it was a 12-acre tract with another 2 acres attached to it that had been the old trolley line.
Back in the day.
1890s, there was a trolley that ran from the depot, stopped at the Carrier Park, and then went on up to the old Sulphur Springs Hotel. It ran until the hotel burned down. And found out since, the trolley line ran right through my backyard. got into researching what that was, and this was the first hydroelectric trolley in the world.
Hydroelectric trolley? They got the energy for the...
They built a dam on the creek to power the trolley. This is...
Wow, I am learning something new. This is excellent.
Yeah, and this was Edmund Carrier, who, of course, Carrier Park was named for, and he'd laid out West Asheville. After the trolley was abandoned, he had already platted the land around it. All the houses on Shelburne come down to the trolley line instead of the creek like they normally would. So that left this 14-acre tract running down there, one piece of property, one parcel to buy to make for a Greenway segment, very low-lying fruit. But my first reaction when I walked down there was, I said, this has got to be public land. Needs to be a land trust. This needs to be a community gathering place. Well, it's becoming that. It's not a land trust, but it's definitely a community gathering place now. And you go down there any day and you'll always see people down there.
You have been involved in working on this, the Omni Creek Greenway, for how many years now?
8.5.
8.5. Tenacious. It's
been my project. It took 4 years before it finally became owned by the city. I originally wanted to buy it as a land trust, but the owners wanted about $400,000 for it. I was brand new in town. I had no idea how to pull that kind of money together and didn't think it was worth that much either. And eventually the city bought it. Maggie Clancy was the field rep back then. She looked at this. She said, this is perfect. This is the best piece of land I've ever seen for Greenway. She went and worked with the city council. Mark Hunt became champion for me. This project would not have happened without my work and Mark's work. I did the grassroots work. Mark did the legal city bureaucratic work, and we pulled it off, and now it's a city park. It's very widely used. Be a few more years before the city really begins doing anything, and I'm fine with that because it leaves us alone. But what has evolved, once we got the land, I formed Friends of Omni Creek Greenway, which has a board of directors. It's a legal corporation now to partner with the city to develop the land. We partnered with Asheville Greenworks. They started doing clearing projects now for, about 3 years. They've had thousands of volunteers down here pulling knotweed, pulling out invasives, planting trees, cleaning up, doing this and that. We've pulled truckloads of tires and other garbage out of there. And, of course, all our waterways are, every time it rains, you see tires floating down French Broad. It's just, it's unbelievable. But then now Riverlink's partner with it, too, and they're been doing a lot of tree planting this year. But by partnering and leveraging our dream, we get these groups to come in and help. The partnerships have been what's made it happen. But I walk down to the Greenway now and I just see thousands of hours and thousands of volunteers have been down there, and I see the results, and it's amazing. It's magic.
It's really a testament to vision and teamwork.
Right. It takes the vision. It takes that dream. It takes commitment. It takes the tenacity. Ready to give up several times in that process, but I just knew that it needed to be. And we almost lost it to a developer. We came real close in the process because the city moves so slow. Anything through the city, it's just it just takes a long time. And developer was in there chomping at the bit. And I think we signed the final contract in the last hour before the developer was
as the clock is ticking down. Well, credit where it's due. Asheville, Buncombe County, certainly in comparison to many areas, is willing to consider some positive steps like this. So It's not quite the battle with City Hall as it might be in some other areas.
That's true. Asheville put up 40%, Buncombe County put up 40%, we raised 20% privately.
Well, that's a nice ratio.
Yeah, most of the private came through the Blue Ridge Bicycle Club. They did a big fundraiser for it. From the beginning, it was partnership, and that's just been the key all along in this project is partnership.
This is Ned Ryan Doyle speaking with Brotherhug Barlow about community, greenways, and much more. Stay tuned for the second half of our program coming up after these messages. We are back for the second half of our program today, talking about developing community with Brotherhug Barlow. I'm your host today, Ned Ryan Doyle. What are the benefits? Why would people want to build greenways?
I can't imagine why people wouldn't want to. The benefits are numerous. In Atlanta, we spent about 28 years fighting a road, and once those spots ended and it became a greenway, it was just this beautiful central place for everybody to go and be outside. Spring days would be hundreds of people rollerblading and sitting out in the sun, reading. We have so little of that left that's not developed around that we need these open spaces. This neighborhood, 9 years ago, I'd be sitting on my porch and nobody walked by my house. Since the Greenway's been open and people cycling it and walking down with their dogs and taking their kids down to go swim in the creek, this is just this whole connection of people in the neighborhood that get together there that normally would sit in their house and not necessarily be out. Most neighbors I've talked to that moved in the last couple of years, I ask them if they've been down there, they'll say, yes, I moved here to be close to it. It brings people together. It opens up. It gives a wonderful space to go. We're fortunate here. I can walk just upstream. Buttermilk Creek runs through my backyard. I walk up Buttermilk Creek. I'm in Malvern Hills Park. I walk down. I'm in Omni Creek Greenway.
As a general rule, wouldn't a good park, a greenway like this, help improve people's property values?
Yes, very much. Houses around here, many of them are these little tiny 50s houses, nothing special at all, but they have a greenway within walking distance.
Brotherhug, you mentioned the Rhododendron Greenway. This is a project underway. The idea, what traction have we gotten on this one?
This was a project that about 9-10 years ago, it was actually being planned before we started on the Omni Creek. The idea of it was to connect to the Westwood co-housing. It got stopped early because one of the key property holders that it had to cross was adamant that it wasn't going to go through their yard. So that fell off the charts. Last summer during the West Asheville Garden Stroll, which is another really great community building project, Janet and I were some of the founders of that. But during that West Asheville Garden Stroll, I ran into one of the gardeners that was on the tour, asked me about it, what it would take to get that going. I said, you can do it. It needs somebody like you to do it. Got them connected with somebody from the Greenway committee. Kim and Nancy are the couple that are taking on. They are spearheading to get this thing happen. What we're aiming for on the Rhododendron Creek Greenway at this point is not as much completion as making a connection across what used to be the Armory property, which is now belongs to the city, making a path across the bottom end of their property that connects Talmadge Avenue to Shelburne Road. So you can walk from West Asheville Park down to Talmadge through the edge of the city property and down to Omni Creek Greenway. One of the problems we've had in Asheville and North Carolina overall on greenways is railroad properties. Railroads are so tight on it. Many of the greenways in Georgia and other areas are built on old railroad lines. And North Carolina law is property reverts to the original owners if the line's abandoned. I know Georgia's converted an awful lot of rails to trails. We've got the Swamp Rabbit Trail down in Greenville, which is everybody.
A big success from all I hear. Yeah, they love it.
But it follows the railroad line. This happens to be on a rail line, and we didn't convert from the rail line. The rail line just got abandoned, and we bought it from somebody who had bought it on the courthouse steps for tax dollars. They wanted to build apartments there. In 1920, the city plan had this ring of parks all the way around Asheville.
Really?
Yes, it was the Nolan plan. Gallatin Roberts was mayor, and Nolan was the city planner. And we actually still have some of those left we're trying to connect. The Omni Creek Greenway would have been a park under that plan.
What visionary thinking. That's almost 100 years ago.
Yes. Of course, 1929 came and those kind of plans hit the skids. Another piece from that Nolan plan is down here in Malvern Hills, a parcel we're working on right now along Caney Creek, and we call it the Caney Creek Greenway. There's 32 acres there in Malvern Hills that in 1820 had been developed as farmland. 1895 became the very first golf course in Asheville. They moved from there in 1897 because after 2 years they realized it was too far outside of the city. Then 1925, Asheville School split off and did the Malvern Hills development and built a golf course there and a clubhouse. And the clubhouse sat on top of the original Sulphur Spring. There's 6 springs up there on that property, but we formed a group of neighbors in Malvern Hills that have taken on to create a land trust to buy this land. They're in negotiations right now with the owners, and it's just trying to work out details now. But that will be another little link in the Greenway section that will connect us from here actually up to the bus stops on Patton, which a lot of people are excited about, to be able to get that connection. There's been some conversation with the city and Goodwill about preserving the springs down there.
Brotherhug, you mentioned different aspects of community interest in greenways, and some people are, shall we say, less than enthusiastic about this, whereas the results are really positive. It seems, though, that the public attitude is shifting to appreciating the benefits of what greenways and community spaces have to offer. From your experience, what does it take for somebody to get active on their own, kind of follow in the Greenway footsteps?
It's something that really anybody can do. In Atlanta, we used to have this saying, every neighborhood needs a land trust. And I believe that. Every neighborhood needs some community gathering space where neighbors get together, they create the space, they can go, they gather. It just takes an idea. It takes a little persistence. It takes commitment, things a lot of people are scared of. Commitment, get out and do it. It takes getting your hands dirty. It takes a little bit of luck. Luck is 90% hard work. If you've got the goal in mind, and for me, having had the experience in Atlanta before of various projects we've done, I knew what the result would be. People now see the value of them more. The more greenways we're able to build, the more people begin to go, wow, this is really nice. And also, the more interconnection there is, the nicer the greenways are. I look forward to the day I can get on my bike and ride downtown from here.
And that would be a sea change in many ways, and especially being able to do it on a greenway.
On a greenway. We're not far from that. But we're actually, in truth, we're not far from downtown connector here. Every time I come back from Colorado, I have a daughter that lives in Colorado, so I'm out there a fair amount. And every time I come back, I get Greenway envy out there. You can get on your bicycle in Boulder and ride to Denver, or you can go from Denver to Aspen on a bicycle along I-40. It just blows my mind that
and we're working to get from one side of the city to the other.
Of course, I mean, the whole state's behind it there. The DOT builds greenways.
From a historical perspective, it really is a return. I grew up in a town that was established in 1642, and the town community green was the central focus. The original homes are all around the green, which is still there today. So the idea of having that commons to gather and celebrate, there's a big circle, so there'd even be parades every once in a while too. It's just bringing back something I think our ancestors were much more aware of than we are today.
As you've said several times, we could do a whole show on that one. The green, unfortunately, has devolved to this little chemically maintained green space in people's front yards. They'll shoot you if you get on.
Credit where it's due. The Lawns to Food movement is getting some traction across the country.
Yes. So many communities, you not only can't have a garden in the front yard or backyard, you can't even have a clothesline. That upsets me.
Those radical solar technologies, like a solar clothesline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the loss of the green. I mean, the green common was maintained. You had people come in and graze their sheep on it, and they'd fertilize the green, and they'd keep it mowed. And now we have to use mowers and chemicals and all that.
Brotherhug, what suggestions, advice, or encouragement would you give to a listener that is sitting there going, all this makes a lot of sense. What can I do?
Dream. If people dream, people look at a space, come up with an idea. Conversation is a big part. Talk to your neighbors. Talk. A lot of what happens with the Greenway is from conversation, just getting out and talking about things, and somebody says, that's a great idea. I'd like to do that. Think about it, vision it, envision it. But the key that helped here is build partnerships, find the groups. We have so many groups in Asheville that are looking for projects. We have so many people wanting to help. For me, Trust for Public Land was the perfect person to get us rolling and go through the red tape of getting the Greenway done. It's a big task for a person by themselves, but when you partner with somebody, some group that this is part of their vision, take it in as a project. It doesn't matter who does the work. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. What matters is that the project gets done.
And you have mentioned a number of organizations in our conversation as community partners that have been very positive and beneficial. How about a thumbnail list of some of the ones you recommend folks at least touch bases with?
Trust for Public Land is good for big projects of this sort. There's several conservancy groups that work the area. One's Henderson County, one works Buncombe. Direct partnerships that we've made were with Asheville Greenworks and with Riverlink. Riverlink is a fiscal agent for our group, so donations that come to us can go to them and be tax deductible. The WNC Alliance has just changed their name. They are
Mountain True
now. They are also working in this area. Any of these groups, if you've got a project of this sort that you'd like to be interested in, they can at least direct you to somebody. We also have the Friends of Connect Buncombe is now very active in terms of getting greenways developed, hopefully working through them on this Rhododendron Creek Greenway. I know their main focus right now is getting Greenway connecting from the Omni Creek Greenway out to Inca, originally to the sports park. Now I think the destination is actually the new Belgium distribution warehouse is what the targeted goal is.
Well, I'll vote for a Greenway to a brewery warehouse.
Yes, well, connect the brewery to their warehouse is the idea of it. So we'll have the Greenway brewery crawls eventually.
Combining some favorite things.
Asheville's very favorite things.
We've become known for the beer nationally, and let's hope we're equally famous for the Greenways. Thanks to your work and many others, it's a shared effort. Many others.
Yes, I'm just a small part. I've done one little piece, but I've demonstrated that individual citizens can be a big part of the Greenway system by getting out and doing it.
Is there a website for you or a way for folks to get in touch with you personally, Brotherhug?
Yes, I have my own personal website. Doesn't have a lot of information on it, but has some about this. It's just brotherhug.com. If you're interested in Omni Creek Greenway, it's FOHCG, Friends of Omni Creek Greenway.com. And then there's another one, Caney Creek. It's a website under construction, but it's under the Friends of Omni Creek Greenway site.
These things take time, just like Greenways.
Yes, not as much time.
Not as much time. Good point.
One little wrap up. The one thing that just to me has been so magnificent in doing the work here and in Atlanta, you work with such amazing people. There's so many committed, dedicated people that want this change. These become the people I spend my time with. I've met so many people in this neighborhood through the work on Omni Creek, and then down in Malvern Hills, I've pulled together a group for the Caney Creek Greenway, and met so many people in West Asheville through the Garden Stroll. These are the people that are committed to this community. These are the people that really want to see this place be magnificent.
A revival of community.
Yes.
What a wonderful way to end our program. Brotherhug Barlow is also available at brotherhug@gmail.com to send an email. Brotherhug, thank you very, very much for being on the program.
Thank you, Ned. I've enjoyed it and like to spread the word.
Thank you for listening to Asheville Free Media. Today's program is an edited